Grand. I am going to move things forwards because we are almost at the half-hour mark, and we need to get to the deep side topic. So I'm going to start by telling you a little story. A couple of years ago, I decided that I wanted to get into small business acquisition, specifically small businesses that had underinvested in technology, because I reasoned that it would be more rewarding to apply my playbooks if I had skin in the game. Now, coincidentally, around that time, I received a connection request on LinkedIn from an investor, which sounded very exciting. And to cut a long story short, that connection request actually turned out to be a robot, but behind the robot was today's guest speaker, Guy Davis. So we actually went on to discover a lot of common ground, and we co-founded myexit.uk, where Guy is very much the brains behind the deal structuring side of things. And so I am delighted that today he's joined us to present his talk titled How to Structure the Deal When Exiting Your Business. So Guy, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Graham. And I love that little intro about our meeting. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see. And while Graham's very kind and says I'm the brains behind the deal structuring, he's the brains behind everything else behind it. So let me go ahead and show you what we're going to go through today. Okay. So Graham's already given you a brief intro, which is great, but really what I want to go through today, and the goal at the end of it is by the end, we should have a realistic view of what it actually takes to get a successful business sale done. We're going to go through some practical steps that you can take to increase your chances of getting a successful exit. We're going to run through some of the most common deal structures that you might use, and in reality, a lot of successful exiting is around how you structure a deal and how you put it together. And then finally, some kind of actionable steps that anybody can take in thinking about how you might go ahead and prepare your own business for sale one day. So first things first, before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of it, I think it's just important to go through some business sale myths. Most people, certainly most people I find, if somebody's coming to sell a business, it's likely the first time they've ever been through that process and they've ever sold a business. Often those people also haven't even been a buyer in a transaction before. So there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about what goes on. One of the first, I think, is people often have a very strong view about valuation and what they think their business is worth. Yes, you can get valuation multiples from various data points. In reality, valuation in small business land is not as simple as a multiple. It depends enormously on your buyer type. And in reality, the business is worth very different amounts depending on who you are presenting it to, and to different buyers, it's going to be worth very different amounts. In most cases as well, in small business land, businesses are typically worth less than their owners think the business should be worth. So it can be a little bit sobering at times. Myth number two, people often think that they can just list their business on a business sale like businesses2sell.com, and they think they can sell their business that way. In reality, very few exits come from marketplaces like that, and I would say even fewer good exits come from marketplaces. You might get lucky, but in reality, business selling is not a passive process. You're going to need to be active in this, and you're going to need to go out and do some work. So in terms of doing that active outreach, a lot of people, one of the first ports of call is going to a broker. Contrary to popular belief, most business brokers tend to make the majority of money on listing fees, not on actual sale commissions. If you look at the percentages of successful sales that brokers achieve, the numbers are usually frighteningly low. They also, as a result, they will typically operate a little bit like estate agencies, in that they might overvalue your business to get you to list with them, only for you to have to cut the price down the line. So it's not always a shortcut to getting this done. Myth number four, the right buyer will find me. It's very unlikely. Most buyers are busy. They may not even be looking. If you're looking for strategic acquirers, they're even busier. You're going to have to get out there and drive this process. And again, the best exits are going to come from if you're active and proactive in getting out to find people. So timing. I would say most business buyers here, when they approach for the first time, think they can probably do it within 6 to 12 months. In reality, most sale processes take longer. There are things you can do to speed the process along, and we'll come on to some of those later. But just prepare yourself mentally that this is not a quick and easy process. This is something that takes a long time. It's also something you should prepare for earlier than you ever think. But even from when you start the process, it's going to take a while to get this done. So have that in your head, because often as people, they think it's only going to take 6 months. And month 7, 8, 9, they're going to be getting very frustrated, impatient, etc. That's when things can unravel. If you have in your head, this is going to take 12, 18, 24 months, likely you're going to be a lot more relaxed throughout the process. Myth number 6, if you are selling your business, in most situations, people would often assume the best sale is the highest price. If you're selling your company, whoever's going to pay you the most is the best exit for you. In reality, that's just not the case. There is a huge variation in what and how you can structure a deal, and how it's structured in terms of the terms you get, and I would say in particular how it's structured and the impact that has on your taxation at the end of it can have a huge impact. And you might find that a lower offer actually ends up resulting in more cash in your pocket at the end of the day. And ideally, for you as a seller, you're looking for 2 key things. You want an exit that you're happy with in terms of where the business is going, your ultimate involvement, how much you need to work, etc., plus the monetary amount. So it's not just always about the money. There's a lot that goes into what a good deal looks like. So I mentioned at the beginning that most business owners, when they come to sell their business, haven't sold a business before. As a result, most people don't always know what buyers are looking for. Just a short list here, but firstly, I would say the vast majority of buyers are going to be looking for stable and predictable cash flows. They're not going to want to see spiky or seasonal numbers, unless you're selling something like a Christmas tree farm. They want to see clean, consistent cash flows. Because bear in mind, if you're selling your business to somebody, they are buying the future cash flows. So for them to have confidence they're going to get any kind of return on their outlay, they need to have confidence that your cash flows are predictable, and as such, they can expect a decent return on their investment. Number 2, absolutely crucial, you need a business that does not rely on you and that operates without you. This is one of the biggest problems that a lot of sellers find themselves in, is that if you've started a business and you're the key operator, if that business doesn't work without you, then it's not worth much without you. So for you to be able to sell an entity, it needs to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, and it needs to be able to exist and thrive without you being in it. And this is one of the things that takes some work, and we'll come on to that again later. Fairly obviously, you are going to need clean and, importantly, transparent financial records. You need ideally professionally prepared accounts, and you need a clear separation between personal and business expenses. In every small business, there's any number of personal expenses that slide through the business that probably shouldn't. As a result, most small business owners want to present adjusted numbers, stripping out their personal costs to show a buyer what they would actually get. If you're going to do that, absolutely fine, but bear in mind any adjustments and any changes you make, that's an immediate red flag to a buyer. So you've got to be really clear about what adjustments you're making and why. Best thing, just be super transparent, make sure everything's very clearly understood and explained. Growth potential. I mentioned at the beginning, when it comes to cash flow, the buyer isn't buying the past, they are buying the future. You want to be able to show that clearly that whoever buys your business, they're going to have the benefit of growth in the future. Do you have untapped marketing channels, geographic expansion possible, new products that you can launch, etc.? The more you can paint a picture to them of upside to their investment, the more excited they're going to be, the more keen they're going to be to do a deal, and the easier it's going to be to sell that business. Number 5, you need some kind of competitive advantage. Again, this comes back to protecting those future cash flows for a buyer. This might be something like your brand, it could be recurring contracts you have, it could be systems in place, IP, relationships, could be any number of things. But these are things you want to communicate clearly, because these buyers are taking a financial risk in purchasing your business, and you want to de-risk that as much as possible for them. And finally, number 6, low concentration risk. Happens a lot in small business, that it might be a situation where one client, one supplier, or one staff member, perhaps you, kind of holds everything together or represents a significant chunk of revenue or profits. That's always a red flag for a buyer because it introduces another risk element. So in an ideal world, you want to diversify clients, suppliers, staff, etc., as much as you can before you go to market. The more you can achieve diversification in those three areas, and the more you can show that de-risking to a potential buyer, the more you're going to be able to achieve in terms of valuation multiple. Now, I mentioned briefly earlier that most sellers, I think typically, certainly on the first sale, most sellers make the mistake of beginning the sale preparation too late. You want to start the process internally long before you think about marketing the business or long before you think about doing any outreach. And in reality, the earlier you start this, the better. There's really no such thing as too early when it comes to this. I've mentioned this once already. I'm going to continue mentioning it. One of the most important things you can do is removing yourself. The business needs to run without you. Somebody, I can't remember his name, but there's somebody who uses the 6-week test. It effectively says, if I own a business and I'm running it, I should be able to go away on holiday for 6 weeks, answer no emails, answer no telephone calls, and the business should make positive progress without me. That's the kind of thing you need to be thinking about. You need to remove yourself from being the rainmaker, the ops manager, the face, whatever it might be. Secondly, internally, you need to start documenting your processes. This will also help with number one, because the more you can document processes, the easier it is to delegate and pass things on. But the real benefit for a buyer here is the buyer is effectively then going to be able to pick up an instruction manual for how to run your business. It's great if they need to make changes to staff members or if they lose staff members. Cleaning all of this up is tremendously helpful for a buyer. It's also going to be helpful for you because going through the process of documentation, you will find areas for efficiency and areas you can improve in your internal processes. So it is worth spending the time going through every area of your business and documenting all of your individual processes. Number three, clean up the books. So I mentioned earlier, you want to spend some time tidying your financials and making sure you have a clean picture that you can present to buyers. Legal housekeeping. You will have an awful lot of contracts, various other things, rent, leases, etc. Often in small businesses, things rely on handshake deals, and you may have relied on handshake deals for certain things for many years. Those are the things that can kill a potential sale. You need to make sure that you have appropriate customer contracts in place. All of the IP that the business relies on needs to be owned by the business, not by you. You need to make sure you have proper employment agreements in place for your staff. Anything that should be legally buttoned down, you need to make sure is legally buttoned down, because all these things can pop up during the due diligence process and can kind of get you unstuck. And then you want to bring it all together and you want to build yourself a virtual data room. Doesn't need to be fancy, can be, just Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever you choose, but start pulling everything together in one place that a buyer might want to see. Thinking about your accounts that we talked about, your org charts, those process documents, your customer contracts, your supplier agreements, and those legal documents. This data room should form the backbone of due diligence, and having all of it together in one place is going to make that initial DD process far quicker and easier. It's also going to have a significant secondary benefit in that we're in a situation at the moment, and will be for probably the next 10 years or so, where there are far more businesses for sale than there are potential buyers. If you have everything in one place and you make it super easy for a buyer to look at your business, you immediately put yourself ahead of the competition. That's a significant benefit when buyers have got so many businesses they could look at. And finally, you want to think about your cash in the business. This is the point at which I would say you want to bring your accountant in and have a chat with them. The reason I mention consider the cash in your business is certainly if you look at business listing sites, a lot of brokers and business listing sites will encourage business owners to offer their business what they call cash-free, debt-free. So effectively, you as a business owner, you ensure the debt's paid off and you clear all the cash out of the bank account and you keep it yourself. For many small business owners, there is an emotional attachment to the cash and they feel it is their cash because they've earned it, they own the business. First of all, in reality, legally, it belongs to the business, not to you as the owner. But aside from that, you as the owner may actually be far better off leaving your cash in the business and selling the business with that cash in it versus taking it out. Just for a very simple reason that if you're going to take it out, you're going to pay income tax on it. For most business owners, that's going to be full fat income tax, versus if you sell it through the business, you're going to be looking at capital gains tax. You may even be able to claim business asset disposal relief. So speak to your accountant here and think carefully before you go ahead and remove all the cash immediately before sale. So I mentioned that this is an active process. The best buyers for your business are unlikely to come to you. They're unlikely to find you through a broker or a marketplace. The best buyers you need to go out and find yourself. And simple 4-step process. First of all, I would say build a target list. Look at your competitors, your suppliers, your customers, effectively look at your own value chain, vertically and horizontally. Is there anybody you can see who would significantly benefit from owning your business? There are often businesses out there in your industry who have been acquisitive in the past. They can be great places to go to. Usually if firms have been acquisitive in the past, they're likely to be acquisitive in the future. And number 2, create a deal pack. So I mentioned the virtual data room earlier. This is going another step on from that. So in addition to your data room, you should have probably at least one, if not both of these 2 things. You should have a well-designed one-pager. You can have a lot of this produced by AI or tools like Canva, as well as a simple presentation deck showing some decent financials, team overview, growth potential for your business. Having a few items like that you can immediately share with potential buyers will again accelerate you to the top of the list in terms of professional sellers, because whether they admit it or not, from the minute a buyer meets you, they will be judging you silently, subconsciously or otherwise, on your professionalism and your seriousness. The more that you can show them a buttoned up approach to this sale process, the more confidence they're going to have you had a buttoned up approach to running your business in the past. Number 3, confidential outreach. So I mentioned that you might want to be talking to customers, suppliers, competitors. Understandably, a lot of business owners don't want to do that because it could be damaging from a competition perspective. This is where you can use an external advisor or an intermediary or just somebody that you trust to perhaps reach out to your target list without disclosing your actual company name. This means you can keep things under control, you can protect your business, but also allow those conversations to begin with serious parties. And at the point at which it becomes serious enough, then of course you enter the room and enter the conversation. Finally, number 4, you've got to be prepared to follow up. This is a slow process. I mentioned there's a lot of companies out there for sale. Most of the good buyers aren't going to bite immediately and expect this to be a kind of a nurturing relationship process over a period of time. So expect to put in some work and expect to put in some time nurturing the best buyers. Now, when you've found your ideal buyer, the 2 of you are going to be keen to get a deal done, keen to get some kind of transaction over the line. The next stage is going to be, how do you go about structuring that deal? There's an awful lot on this slide. I'm just going to talk through it briefly. Graham will certainly share this so you can have a read at your leisure. But I've just pulled out here 5 of what I would say kind of the most common deal structures that we see in UK transactions. So number 1, all cash. This is arguably the kind of the deal unicorn for you as a seller. It's where you get all the cash on day 1 and off you go into the sunset. It does happen, but again, misconception, it happens an awful lot less often than most people think. Most buyers are very unwilling to take this level of risk. The simple reason, and I'll come on to this in a second, but in any transaction, there is a significant, there is a risk asymmetry in that you as the seller know everything about your business. So you are holding all of the information. The buyer is taking information risk because they don't know everything. If they also pay you all upfront on day 1, in addition to taking all that information risk of having unknowns, they're also then taking all of the financial risk because they paid everything on day 1. It's unreasonable for somebody to take both levels of risk on themselves, which is why all cash deals are rare. If you do get one, then you're likely to be selling at a much lower valuation because from a buyer's perspective, they're going to pay a lower price to protect themselves from that future risk. So number 2, deferred consideration. this is where you are effectively agreeing a fixed amount for your business, but it's going to be paid in installments over time. This helps the buyers a lot with cash flow and arguably their risk management. But you as a seller understand that your tax, your capital gains tax, is usually still due on the full sale price up front, even if you're not actually going to get paid until the future. So you don't want to end up in a situation where you end up owing more tax on day one than you've just received in down payment. So it's just something to think about. There are ways around this through structures like loan notes. Again, this is where you want to bring in a decent accountant because you can save yourself an awful lot of capital gains if you structure things properly. Number 3, earnouts. This is probably the most common, and I would say the most deals involve some element of earnout. And the reason is it's just a really nice way of balancing that risk between buyer and seller. So you're going to have some kind of down payment and some kind of earnout, which will be performance related over a 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes as long as 10-year period. They create wonderful alignment of risks and incentives. They can be helpful for you in terms of tax because you don't always have to pay the tax up front. And I always think whenever I'm on the buying side, it's always a really useful tool to talk to a potential seller about an earnout, because if a seller is very unwilling to take an earnout, that's an enormous red flag for you as a buyer, because what you're effectively saying is we're going to share some of the profits of this business going forwards. Now, if I'm a buyer and a seller says they don't want to do an earnout, I'm immediately thinking, what do they know about this business that I don't? Why do they want all their cash now? Are they expecting the business is going to decline in the future? So bear in mind as well that while you may have a preference for getting all your cash out on day one, how you present things and what you want and what risk you're willing to take can have a real impact on your potential buyer. Number 4, partial exit. I think these are becoming more and more common, and they actually make an awful lot of sense for some people. Simply put, you're going to sell a portion of your business now, and you're going to retain some equity for the future. So you might sell 80% of the business and maintain a minority 20% stake. You can still participate in dividends. These kind of exits are really helpful for businesses where you are heavily involved, particularly with strong client relationships, because you can present to the clients that you are still involved in the business. You might still be on the board, you've still got a 20% equity stake, etc., etc. It can be really powerful for kind of client relationships and client continuation if you do things like partial exits over time. Finally, EOTs, employee ownership trusts. This is a little bit more of a complex sales structure, but from a seller can be fantastic because you have the ability to sell 100% of your shares completely free of capital gains tax. Now, the criteria that you need to meet to qualify for an EOT are quite technical, so you're going to need an expert to walk you through this. But it can often be worth it if you're not having to pay any tax. Bear in mind the valuation you receive is likely to be lower than if you sold on the open market, but net, you may still end up with more cash in your pocket because you've not had to pay any tax. And you also need, as the seller, you need to be confident that your employees have the ability professionally to take this business on and manage it themselves, because they are going to be who you're selling it to. So moving on, information asymmetry. I touched on this briefly earlier, but always have this, it's worth mentioning again, always have it in your head that in any transaction, there is a significant asymmetry going on, in that you as the seller hold all the information cards. The financial risk cards depend on the deal structure that you end up coming up with. But this is the reason why all cash deals are extremely rare, or if they do happen at really low valuations. Now, when it comes to getting deals over the line, there's going to be some negotiation involved. There's an enormous amount of great content when it comes to negotiation. I would definitely recommend Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. It's superb. He's also got an online video course that he does, which is fantastic. Alex Hormozy, who probably many of you know, I'm going to credit him with this list of tips. He does an awful lot of great content on this as well. But there's a few things that you can do to help you in the negotiation process. And this works on either side, but I'm going to present it for you as a potential seller. So first up, have options. What he here really means is ideally have a number of buyers lined up. Hormozy uses the phrase, whoever needs a deal most loses. Typically, if you've only got one buyer, they're your only option. You're going to it's going to come off in your negotiation. You're going to, without wishing to, you're going to seem more needy. You will likely end up with a worse deal than if you have a number of options on the table. And again, this comes down to how hard you work at the beginning in building your buyer list and making sure you have options on the table. Number two, anchor first, move small. So this is just I would say, a traditional kind of haggling technique. Let's say if you ask 2 million for your business and they come back and offer 1, natural response for a lot of people would be to counter with 1.5. In reality, you're probably far better off countering immediately at 1.9. It sends a significant message to whoever you're transacting with about how you're willing to concede financially, depending on how you end up moving your anchoring and your positions. But I'd also say in a lot of transactions or a lot of recommendations, I've heard people many times say, don't be the first one to make to offer a number, always wait for the other party. Personal view is get a number out there early, anchor them to something. And I would say anchor that and ideally have the valuation conversation way before you get into any DD. I've seen so many people waste enormous amounts of time going through due diligence process and as both a buyer and a seller, and it turns out afterwards they're way off in terms of their estimates of value of that business. Have a conversation early about rough valuation levels, agree a rough range at which you're both happy to participate, and then go and do all the DD. It's much better doing it up front. Number 3, multiple offers. This is a great technique and you can use this in many different areas. But if you're going to anchor first, you're going to give somebody an offer. Don't just give them one offer, give them 2 or 3. Now, these 2 or 3 offers might vary in terms of price, terms, structure, whatever it might be, but give them 2 or 3. It does a number of wonderful things for you. 1, it shows that you're really flexible and you're going to be a great person to work with because you're not fixed to any one thing. You're not just saying, I need 100% cash or I'm walking. And number 2, it also reframes in their mind, it moves away from the question of, are we going to do a deal? And the question now becomes, which deal are we going to do? Which is tremendously helpful when you're dealing with another party. If you just present one offer, their choice is then, do I take this offer or not? It's yes or no. If you present 2 or 3, it becomes, which offer do I take? So it's a weirdly successful psychological trick to present them with multiples rather than just one. And number 4, within those offers, think about flexibility from your perspective in terms of the variables. Every offer has different levers that you can pull to tweak certain things. You might present 3 offers to them. They might like the price of one, but the terms of another, or the structure of a third. You can move all of these things around. Deal making in general is effectively an enormous puzzle. And think of things as the 2 of you operating together, you as seller, them as buyer, operating together to solve the problem. The problem is the deal, and you're working together to solve that. And it's a case of putting together these puzzle pieces. So always think of it in those terms. Finally, just a couple of warning points on things that are the biggest deal killers that I tend to see. So first off, inflated valuation expectations. This can be a real deal killer, and I would say inflated from a seller's perspective or deflated from a buyer's perspective. Again, have the conversation about valuation up front, early, get it out of the way, make sure you can proceed or not. Don't let this affect you in terms of pride, in the sense that if somebody offers you something really low, your business is worth different amounts to different people. So it may just be that they're not the right buyer for you. Communication is a real killer. Deals are slow processes and they get an awful lot slower if you're not quick to respond on things. For me, if I'm dealing with somebody and they're slow and not communicative, it just opens up loads of red flags about how they've been dealing in their business or how they're going to be dealing with me post-transaction. Because again, you're going to have to work with these people at least for a period of times after the deal. So you want to be sure this is somebody you can work with. And you want to be yourself, somebody else is going to want to work with. Surprises. I mentioned a bit about this around the financials. You want no surprises in DD, whether it's hidden adjustments to your numbers, unexpected tax, missing contracts, major client dependencies, whatever it might be, something nasty in your books historically, lawsuits. If buyers feel like you've been holding something back, there's a good chance they're going to walk away, because they will immediately then assume there are other things you're holding back as well. And the minute you break that trust, you're not going to be able to recover it. So you've really got one go at this. Best thing to do, just be completely upfront, be completely transparent. If there's skeletons and mess, there's mess in every business. Every small business, in some respects, is a disaster and has some terrible elements to it. That's fine. Just be honest about it and don't let them find out as a surprise, because they're just going to end up walking away. Number 4, emotions. I put seller emotions here, but the emotions go on either side. It often falls on the seller. But if you're selling your business, think really hard about what this is going to look like. Think about your involvement post the deal. Think about what you want from a transaction, and really put your mind's eye into going through this process, because sometimes sellers get cold feet and they change their mind at the last minute from a business they've run for 15 or 20 years, and it just wastes everybody's time. You want to be really clear and really confident in yourself, either as a seller or as a buyer, about the emotional impacts of a transaction, because deals are enormously emotional in the small business space. They're not just financial. Finally, I mentioned that you want to think of yourself with the buyer trying to solve the problem of the deal. That's the best way to think about it. Deal making and negotiation is not a zero-sum game. In the best transactions, everybody's happy, everybody feels like they've got a good deal, and everybody can work together in the future. That's the best way. If one party feels like they've been screwed over, shafted, whatever it might be, it's not a good outcome for anybody, and those are the deals that tend to unravel later down the line and things don't work out. Finally, if there's something that you guys are thinking of doing, and you have business that you want to sell in the next 12 or 36 months, my recommendation would be get cracking as soon as you possibly can. The sooner you start this process, the better. It's long and slow, and the more prep you can do early, the better. I appreciate I've rolled on a fair bit there, and we've got 1 minute to go. Happy to take any questions in the 60 seconds we've got left.
Brilliant. Okay.
Thank
For
you.
benefit of anyone here or on video, Guy, where can people find you if they would like to have a chat?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Guy Davis Noe, it's probably the best place, and happy to connect.
Brilliant. In which case, let's leave it there. Thank you for your talk today, Guy. That was brilliant. And thanks everyone else for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.